So picture this. It's the 9th century, and a ruler's most elite protectors, they become his assassins. And not just that, they eventually become the masters of his entire empire. It is a wild story of power, betrayal, and some seriously unintended consequences. And we are going to break down exactly how it all went down.
All right, so let's set the scene. It's a cold December night in 861, and we're in the incredibly rich capital city of Samarra. The Abbasid Caliph Al-Mutawakkil is holding this big feast, lots of wine and entertainment, but you can just feel this tension in the air. And as the night gets darker, that tension is about to snap.
And that just begs the question, right? How did the caliph's own guards become his murderers? I mean, these weren't just some random palace guards. This was a professional army created for one reason and one reason only, to protect the caliph. So how did they end up with their swords at his throat? Let's get into it. Okay, so the scene is set. The caliph is enjoying himself when a Turkish officer, a guy named Buga the Younger, walks into the hall with his soldiers' swords drawn. And right at that moment, and you gotta love the timing on this, the caliph's own son and heir, Al-Muntasir, he just conveniently slips away from the party. The stage is officially set for a coup.
So as the guards storm in, it's total chaos. Everyone runs for their lives, courtiers, servants, you name it. But one man stands his ground. It's the caliph's highest official, his vizier, Elfith ibn Khaqan. He literally throws himself in front of his master, fighting completely alone until he's cut down. Then the assassins turn on the caliph. And here's the kicker, the ultimate irony. The fatal blow is delivered with a sword that Al-Mutawakkil himself had gifted to the officer.
You know, the way they treated the bodies afterwards, it tells you everything you need to know about this power shift. There was no big funeral, no ceremony. The ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the world and his loyal advisor were just rolled up in a carpet and left there. The old authority, it was completely and utterly gone. So how in the world did we get here? To understand that, we have to rewind the clock a bit. Who were these Turkic soldiers, and why did they have so much power? Well, their story starts not as conquerors, but as slaves. Okay, so the key term here is Mamluk. It literally means owned, as in property. They were slave soldiers, usually from Turkic backgrounds, bought when they were boys, trained their whole lives for war, and then formed into these elite military units that were supposed to be completely loyal to their master. But don't get the wrong idea. This wasn't some part-time militia. We're talking about a permanent, professional, absolutely elite fighting force. Now, this army didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, it was the result of a very deliberate and, as it turns out, very fateful strategy. A caliph before this one, Al-Mutasim, he didn't trust the old armies, so he decided to build a brand new one from scratch, made of these Mamluks. And to make sure they were loyal, he did something radical. He moved the whole capital and set up a system to keep his new army totally isolated. And when we say isolated, we mean really isolated. This was extreme. In the new capital of Samarra, the Mamluks were kept completely apart from everyone else. They had their own neighborhoods, they couldn't marry local women, they even had their own mosques. The whole idea, right, was to make them loyal only to the caliph. But what it actually did was create this completely separate military class that had zero connection to the people or the society they were supposedly protecting. A huge mistake. So you've got this isolated, powerful army just sitting there. It's like a powder keg waiting for a spark. So what was that final spark that lit the fuse against Caliph Al-Mutawakkil? Well, in the last few months of 861, the caliph made one disastrous move after another. He kept publicly disrespecting his own heir, Al-Muntasir, who happened to have the army's support. Then he went and seized the property of a top general. And the final straw, rumors started flying that he was about to have the army's leadership arrested and executed. You can see how this is building, right? They felt backed into a corner. So the generals and the son he'd been humiliating, they decide they have to strike first. So the caliph is dead. But this wasn't the end of the story. Oh no. In fact, it was just the beginning of a brand new and, frankly, terrifying chapter for the Abbasid Caliphate. For the next 9 years, the murder of the caliph unleashed a period of absolute chaos. This era gets its own name in the history books, the anarchy at Samarra. The Kingmakers were now running the show, and the throne was not a safe place to be. And at the heart of this chaos was this impossible situation, a real catch-22. See, the state was basically going broke. Tax money was drying up. It couldn't afford to pay this massive army it had created. But for this army, That salary from the state was their lifeline. It was how they survived. So anytime their pay was late or threatened, they got violent. They started installing and killing caliphs just to protect their own paychecks. And the result? It was this absolutely brutal revolving door on the throne. Al-Muntasir, the son who helped kill his dad, was dead himself in less than 6 months. His successors, they were deposed, tortured, and killed one after the other. So let's just recap. In just 9 years, you have 4 caliphs on the throne, and every single one of them is violently removed by the very same guards who were supposed to be protecting them. Unbelievable. So, after all that bloodshed and chaos, what was the long-term fallout? This wasn't just some blip on the radar. It fundamentally reshaped the entire Islamic world forever. This event basically marks a permanent shift in power. It's a point of no return. The caliph was no longer the one in charge. His power became symbolic, more like a religious figurehead. The real power was now in the hands of the Turkic military commanders. It's like the caliph was the king on the chessboard, but the generals were the players moving all the pieces. The caliph reigned, but the generals, they rule. And this idea, this Mamluk system, it didn't stay in Samarra. It spread like wildfire across the Muslim world. Mamluks went from being guards to generals to even regional rulers. And get this, they eventually founded their own empire, the Mamluk Sultanate, that ruled for centuries. These are the guys who famously defeated the supposedly unstoppable Mongol invasion and finally drove the last of the Crusaders out of the Holy Land. All from a class of slave soldiers. It's an incredible story.
Which brings us back to where we started and leaves us with this one big thought. This is more than just a history lesson from the 9th century. It's a timeless story about power and control. The caliphs built this isolated professional force to make their rules secure, but in doing so, they created the very thing that destroyed them. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often does a system built to protect power become the very thing that brings it all crashing down? How often do the walls we build to keep us safe end up becoming our own prison?